Hello, family. Oh, it is so good to be here on today and to share a topic with you that has been birthed from really COVID, uh, COVID 19 realities. My name is Reverend Dr. William Edward Flippin Jr. I'm an ordained pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I'm a preacher, an ecumenist. What in the world is an ecumenist? That means a bridge builder for denominations and interfaith dialogue. I serve as the co-chair for advocacy and voice for the Lutheran World Federation, 75 million Lutherans worldwide. And also I'm a political commentator. So the topic on today that I want to explore and I will expound on in a workshop is toward the village of life from trauma to transformation, from trauma to transformation. Admittedly, in my over 2-decade public career, I believe that the key to my success has been network building and leveraging relationships. I've said it many, many times. It's all about relationships, period. But with COVID-19, with this pandemic, with the countless Zoom calls and business as usual, and the assumptions that there are no conflicts of time, caused me as a husband to just celebrate my 18th wedding anniversary on yesterday, to lose the nuances of my wife's emotional needs as a first responder and cancer specialist nurse. I got so enthralled in working and trying to do a good job that I became blindsided, tunnel vision. I will admit that, of the realities of the circle of life. And I'll talk about that later. My proposed presentation toward the village of life from trauma to transformation will trace the historical realities of overworking and slavery, and in general, and how can the village or the collective respond to this gruesome reality. Let me say something about nonprofit. Nonprofit does not mean that you to accept slave wages. Nonprofit does say that you are working not for the sole reality to line your pockets, but also on the flip side, it doesn't mean that you're working for slave wages, that you're working yourself to death. And because of the lack of labor and to save money and to hoard resources, people are working themselves to death, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. I will say this, I am a church growth strategist, and I believe in the next 3 to 4 years that the biggest aspect that at least pastors can do is to be a practitioner and to just have conversations with people as a fellow sojourner to make sense or to grapple with all the things that have taken place with COVID-19. At least with 9/11, as traumatic it was, that you did have community. The worst thing that has taken place with COVID-19 is that we've been stripped from community. I believe George Barner says, who's a church growth strategist, said that at least 20% of all churchgoers would never step into a church again. Yeah, they might be used to eating pancakes and wearing their pajamas, but there is a correlation to this in the civic, in the philanthropic, in the business world that would take place in trying to make sense of this transition back into the workplace. Americans, they love hard workers. Work hard and you get elevated in your career. Earn greater respect among your peers and see increasing affection from your family as you are able to provide more and more. Hard work coupled with independence and the ability to rise from nothing to succeed in life is the narrative of the American dream. Rise from your own bootstraps. But how can you rise from your own bootstraps when you don't even have boots to wear? Think about those who criticize those who seem as if that they get government handouts, that they're lazy, but they received bootstraps. They received land grants. Look at the history of Texas A&M University, land grants to build upon this. So how can we criticize when we don't even provide the emotional resources for our fellow brothers and sisters? I'm reminded of a biblical passage where Jesus finds himself in a familiar setting with crowds packed in around him. Crowds realize that he teaches with authority, commands demons, he heals. But Jesus did something that was useful. He sent out 12 in pairs. Instead of him knowing that or putting the burden upon himself, he trained others to teach in the villages, to cast out evil spirits and heal the sick. Returning from their first road trip, the disciples gathered to share stories of their experiences. They deserved a rest from their work, so Jesus takes them to a deserted place for some needed rest and relaxation. This is where I want to start with some CEO nonprofit leaders. Many of those who have sat in Zoom calls for over a year, please provide opportunity for them to rest. Please provide for them, even beyond opportunities that says in their packages, 4 weeks. And don't make them feel guilty for wanting to rest and to relax. What about the labor? What about this? No. Your best workers need rest. It's no accident that if you just ride around and see restaurants, when have you seen this at restaurants? They are basically begging people for employment and labor. People would rather just do other things, not even make wages for rest and relaxation. We see this on the Hills, that just the 31st of July, the moratorium of housing and evictions have stopped. So now persons must pay their rent. And how do you pay your rent? It's through labor and work. So before they get into the labor, please allow them to rest. In the fast-moving text of action and description, the key is Jesus' reaction. He isn't angry. He doesn't claim his rights to rest. He doesn't sit numb and ignore people's needs. Jesus, in the midst of rest, stops to see the spiritually malnourished crowd who were like scattered sheep. And the Bible says that he has compassion deep within his being. We must take time to rest. David says, and I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove, for then I would fly away and be at rest. Lo, then would I wander far off and remain in the wilderness. Have you ever felt like David, just to want to get away, just to pull the covers over you, go to a deserted island, that your cell phone won't go off, that people can't detect you, that you get to a place, that even the Bible, one of its most famous scriptures says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. There is a lesson that even in 6 days of creation, I don't believe it was actually just 6 days, that on the seventh day, thou shalt rest. Even your cars need resting. Believe it or not, even your TV needs resting. So even if electronics need resting, surely to God, we need rest. I'm gonna give you an illustration, CEOs. The concept of rest is a person being able to rely on God or sport or something rather than what you force to yourself. Let's think about a quarterback. The quarterback receives the ball from the center. The defensive line then presses in on them, seeking to sack them behind the line of scrimmage. But the quarterback will turn its running play and hand it off to the halfback. The halfback takes the ball and goes in the direction of the play call. At this point, the pressure that was coming to the quarterback shifts to the halfback. Originally, the pressure is aimed at the quarterback because he's got the ball. But when he hands it off, and now everybody's going after the halfback, the quarterback has rest. He or she has rest because they've handed off the pressure to someone else who's carrying the ball. We're so determined to make things happen, to make sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, that we can't hand off or delegate our responsibilities to others. I know I just contradicted myself and said, stop giving so much responsibilities and let them rest, but also to understand that the collectiveness of our productivity, our force must be working together. We must work together. And the way that we do this is through compassion. Say with me, compassion. Most people think that compassion is feeling sorry for someone. Regular church folk or other may have heard the simple but powerful etymology of compassion. The Latin cum means with, and passio means to suffer. Compassion is suffering with one another, bringing action into our affection. The Hebrew for compassion, ra kamim, is used to refer to the womb of God. Compassion is something that emanates out from deep within us. The Greek word splanchnizomia has connections to one's guts. From it, we get the English medical term splanchnic, referring to the internal vital organs, heart, liver, kidney. In the worship of first century pagan gods and goddesses, one could offer a sacrifice to a deity. The animal sacrifice would be brought to that god's temple, killed, cut open, and the vital organs will be pulled out. The animal carcass was sacrificed, but the vital organs will be taken out and cooked as a meal. Those vital organs are the splachna, the New Testament noun for compassion. Just as vital as our organs are just as vital as we must have compassion for our fellow workers and our fellow humanity. Let me tell you something. This is something that can't be taught. I don't care how many training courses that you have, that you must have compassion. And from that, you will have purpose, direction, assurance in the midst of loneliness, in the midst of emptiness, in the midst of disturbance, in the midst of depression. It's coming, y'all. Sickness, death. That's why Jesus says that in the midst of this, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never be hungry. He that believeth on me shall never thirst. I am the living bread, which came down from heaven. If any man or woman eat of this bread, they shall live forever. And the bread which I give is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. This is important. One of the things, too, and as I have about 5 or 6 minutes left, I want to give you a summary about the realities about how work can become an idol. And also what I'm going to touch on the seminar or the workshop about how slavery, post-traumatic syndrome correlates the idea of overworking. Let me say a little bit about that. Do you realize that slaves, and to a certain extent, their owners, paid the psychological cost of a society based on violence, obedience, and submission? As the slave Isabella in the Hudson River, who later became Sojourner Truth, listen to this, who's a liberation figure that neglected her own children to work for her owners, including their children. While the mother plays with the white child in her charge, her own child is disregarded, clings to her skirt. Slave owners placed great values on slave demeanors, which was to remain cheerful and submissive at all times. In that familiar, work yourself to death, working yourself to the bone to get a six-figure salary. Slavery cost slaves income and wealth. They made no wages, although some masters paid bonuses as incentives for good work. Lacking wages, slaves could not save. Slaves had no legal right to hold property, and without wages, they were seldom able to accumulate property. As in the case of wages, some masters offered favor slaves the use of property. But because slaves could not change employers of their own volition, they could not use the skills they acquired to better their situation by finding improved working conditions or jobs that paid more. Let me say this, that any time that a slave was branded or defined of what they were good at, whether it was a cook, whether it was a breeder, it was not based on their own vocational discernment. It was based on what the slave master defined them as. And the way that they defined them is that whatever that was given to them, they remained cheerful, docile, happy, content. One of the most famous works of the late 19th century, Black poet Paul Laurence Dunbar commemorates the need to conceal emotions. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shade our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. So, as we conclude this, I want to continue to explore the ongoing definitions of what it means to be the CEO founder role, engaging with sources of honest feedback by interested but not invested members, investing structured time, working at the strategic level of the business, looking at our own mission plan. How has that changed? And allow that to be discussed through employment, through employees, gaining experience with issues not yet encountered in one's own business, expanding one's network of like-minded entrepreneurs. How do we build within? How do we build a structure based on what has taken place? I'll leave you with this. My final 2 minutes. Jeff Bezos. I know he's probably not the greatest example right now with the rocket ship, but he is indeed the wealthiest person in the world. He says this work-life balance is not about being at work and being at home and balancing that. He says that work-life balance is a circle, that it all goes together. That if you are happy at home, you'll be happy at work. If you're happy at work, you'll be happy at home. That it all comes together in the village. And that perception is organic. So I will continue to explore. How do we deal with the circle of life as it compares to the life cycle of corporations through the Adidas model? How do we look at, just in our own context, of a Simone Biles, who's the greatest gymnast to ever live, to say, hey, I need some time for myself, and to allow our counterparts to accept that? How do we be Clark Kent in the midst of Superman expectations? How can CEO nonprofit leaders step to the plate and define new models of compassion for their workers, to be sensitive through the precepts of ethics, Christian ethics, and pure learning models as we move forward. This concludes my keynote. I look forward to talking to you even more and discussing these concepts as we move forward together as fellow sojourners, as fellow business leaders, as fellow compassionate leaders of humanity. Thank you.